Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to talk more about homeschool versus public school, but the cons. So in my last video, I talked about all the pros of homeschool and public school. What's wrong with both of them? You probably have your own opinions. I'm just going to share some of mine. So as some of you know, I have my own tutoring business. I've also had the opportunity to teach public school for a few years, and now I'm actually teaching homeschool. So I've gotten to see the best and the worst of both worlds. So let's jump into it. Let's start with homeschool because that's what I started with last time in my other video, which you should totally go watch because I make a lot of really good points that you guys probably can either learn from or agree with. The very first con when it comes to homeschooling your children is the money and the commitment. Homeschooling means that an adult has to be in the house somewhere. That means either your spouse or you will be the one that stays in the house and has to look up curriculum, buy the curriculum, and maybe even teach that curriculum. Homeschooling isn't just something you can dabble in for a month or two and say, nah. Homeschooling means you've got to purchase curriculum and stick to it all year long, or at least that's how it is with effective homeschooling. So some of the students that I homeschool, they have books, and this is just English, by the way. I am an English teacher, so these are just 2 of the books, and actually it comes with a whole lot more than this. Public school, they say, is free. It's not really. You still pay some in public school, but for homeschool, you've got to buy curriculum. If you have 4 or 5 kids, that's a lot of decisions to make. So just consider, is this something I can handle? Can my family handle doing the research, selecting the best curriculum for my sons and daughters? Is this something that is going to be effective for them? Is it too easy? Is it too hard? How are we going to pace the entire year? Are we going to study 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week? Are we working 1 hour every single day? Are we going to do cross curriculum? Are we going to take our family field trips? Now, thanks to the internet, there is a lot of information out there. Both this year and last year, I've been teaching through Michael Clay Thompson curriculum, and it's really great for ELA. It's very content heavy, but that means that I, as a teacher, have to come up with lesson plans for the students. It doesn't tell you step by step of what to say and how to deliver content. You have to come up with that yourself. So some parents are good at that because maybe they used to teach. If you are a parent considering homeschool but you have never taught before, you're either going to have to make a pretty huge life change, or you're going to have to budget for a tutor / homeschool teacher to come into your house to teach that content. Which leads me to my second con of homeschool. You have to have spacing can be an issue. A lot of people will teach and work at their dining room table, but then it's no longer the dining room, it's the learning environment. So you've got to decide, oh shoot, where are they going to study? Where can they learn where they're less distracted? Where can they learn where they're not tempted by the TV or the internet or their phone? And then what type of reward system can I have in place? Because you've got to have space for all these books. With spacing issues comes organizational issues. If you have 3 kids or more and they're all on a different grade level, they're all learning something new, you've got to come up with a system. Where do our school supplies go? Where do the books go? How are we going to study with 3 different kids in 3 different places? How are we going to do it? So it's not a bad thing to have all these questions. It's just you as the parent or the homeschool teacher have to really pitch in and figure out, how is this going to work for the student? The third point is choosing the proper curriculum. There's so much out there. There's Abeka, there's Michael Clay Thompson, there's My Father's World. There's all these things out there, and if you have the opportunity, you can go to a convention. You can get your hands on all these homeschool books. Years ago, my cousin got a teaching degree, but then she realized she had the opportunity to homeschool her children. So she's done this for 12 years, but she did admit that it wasn't so easy making every decision. It is a family commitment. It involves the whole family. She recommended a book by Kathy Duffy called 102 Top Picks for Homeschool Curriculum that will help determine the students' learning style. So if you are a parent and you don't have a teaching background, you have to pretty much turn yourself into a teacher. You have to go and look through all that curriculum and make that choice for your family and decide, okay, I'm going to buy these books. I don't want to waste money on the wrong thing, but once I've done the research, I buy the books. Now we have to figure out, how are we going to teach them? Or should I hire somebody else to teach them? Can I find somebody who can go through this curriculum with them and help them stay on track and help them be great readers and thinkers and learners. If you're a parent and you know parents who are homeschooling their children, I would advise you to ask, what curriculum are you guys using? What do you guys do for middle school math? Because I'm out of my element there. You've got to really, as they say, find your tribe. Help each other out in these cases. Another con to homeschooling is the fact that when you're at home, sometimes it can be a bit more like too lax, like too relaxed. For students who have been in a traditional school system, for them to suddenly get to learn at home, they might think, okay, now things will be easier. So you've got to find a way to break out of that mindset and say, no, we're treating this like real school. No, you're not in the school building. There won't be bells going off. There's not an actual principal, but we have to follow some type of a schedule. Now you do have more freedom. You don't have to start at 8 o'clock and end at 3:30. I feel that students need some sort of, what's the word? Gosh, what is that word? But students, especially younger students, need some type of structure. They can't just roll out of bed whenever, do their algebra or piano lessons, or do their reading whenever, social studies whenever. You've got to figure out some type of schedule that's going to work, because a schedule will make them respect the academic work a lot more. You want a healthy homeschool environment, but you don't want it to be so relaxed and so easy that it's not effective at all. The whole purpose of homeschool is to be more effective than the public school system might be. Students still need to treat you, the parent, with respect, as well as the teachers who might come in to teach them at home. They also need their own self-respect. So if you have a schedule and the right kind of curriculum, then there's really no room to be relaxed. Now, you can't treat it like, yeah, we'll just do it whenever we feel like it. It has to be serious. My mom, as a teacher, has had students come into her classroom who were homeschooled, but it wasn't really the proper way. It was maybe they were sort of homeschooled, but they were behind academically. The students that I teach, they are ahead academically. They're ahead of their public school counterparts, and that's simply because they've had opportunity to focus and move along. There's no teaching to a curve. Once something is mastered, they can move along. With that said, the fifth and final con of homeschool life is just, and this might be controversial, but it can really further the gap between a fifth grade student in public school and a fifth grade student in homeschool. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that you've got homeschool groups, whatever. They're learning, a lot of them are learning better and doing better simply because they can focus on the content so much more than what public school can offer. But yet you've got this national imbalance of kids who are being homeschooled. It's a great, wonderful blessing for kids to be homeschooled in the correct and proper way. But for all the kids who would probably really benefit from a homeschool environment, they're not getting that. In public school, maybe they're too shy. Maybe the teacher can't reach them, or maybe they miss a lot of school days and therefore they're behind academically. So in a lot of cases, you're going to have kids who are excelling in a super way, but I guess that's life. That's competition. It is sad when there are kids who would probably really benefit and excel in a much smaller homeschool environment, but maybe their parents can't provide that because maybe they don't have the means to do that, or it's not convenient for them, or maybe they just don't know about it. But that's why I'm here to help, just to break this down and make you guys think about it. But there's no cons to public school. Just kidding. Guys, I actually came up with 8 cons. These are the 8 cons of public school, and they are in no particular order. Number 1, you can go through the system and not really learn how to be particularly good or anything because maybe you were never really inspired or told to focus on any one particular thing. You just kind of went along with everybody else because you were afraid to stand out, or you just didn't know what you liked, and suddenly you've graduated high school with very few skills. So on paper, a student might seem average. Public school might just give you a very average education. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to have this specialized, individualized education plan where you're super, super good at science and you can do everything in the world. No, school isn't for everybody. College isn't for everybody either. But you know what? That's another video for another day. With public school, you can accidentally not learn enough. You can go K through 12, you graduate, and suddenly, oh gosh, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I'm good at. And what do I do with my life? And I was pretty much one of those people. A second con of public school is that a lot of kids are there in the classroom and they have this ultimate fear of standing out. You've got all these different types of people. Like I mentioned before in a previous video, the diversity in the classroom and among the faculty and staff is a good thing. But sometimes that means that students are afraid to voice their opinion and they're afraid to stand up in front of a class and speak, and they're fearful to try anything new just because there's so many eyes on them. So as a teacher, I found that there were so many students in my classroom who had plenty of skills, and sometimes it was hard to get them to want to stand out from the crowd. I really tried my best to get students to be bold, and students with a lot of unique interests and skills would kind of come in and be quiet about it. Like, yes, I like anime, but I don't want I can't talk to anybody about it. Like, people here just give me a hard time. Or maybe a student was really good with writing stories. They were a very creative writer, but they didn't want to share their stories with anybody for fear of judgment. There's too many people out there. Oh, they don't care, whatever. A homeschool environment would actually enable those types of students to shine because they would get more one-on-one attention. They would have the opportunity to really spend more time focusing on those skills rather than just doing them and then hiding them. And it's okay to be shy. You know, a lot of students go through the public school system. They're talented, they're smart, and they do fine. They didn't need homeschool. You also have students who really need extra help and would benefit from a smaller, more focused environment, but they just simply don't want it, or they're afraid of it, and they just say, nah, I know I need extra help, I need tutoring, but I don't really want to stay after school because the teacher's there, and I don't want people to see me being tutored by my teacher after school. Like, that's weird, that's embarrassing. My friends will walk by and be like, what's she doing? She's dumb. And that's a shame, but it happens. It's common. The third con for public school is that a lot of the academic content is very surface level. So for instance, when it comes to showing students really important things of our history, like the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King, I think I've taught that I probably taught that almost every year in public school. So the problem is you can breeze through that thing and just have kids listen to it on the tape, digital, or on YouTube or something. You could easily just glance over that speech, answer 2 or 3 questions, and then move on without really talking about what does this speech really mean? What did it really mean for people back then? And how does it affect us today? This could be a 2 or 3 day discussion in the homeschool environment. You could probably do a week just focusing on all the speeches and writings of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. Now, that doesn't mean the civil rights movement is not talked about in public school. It definitely is. But sometimes students don't really get to feel and see the impact. There's just not a lot of time to go in depth with these things. If you're studying civil rights, so many books out there where there's this book, this story, this real life thing happened during this time, instead of just hitting the highlight. That's what a lot of public school is you're just hitting the highlights, and they say sometimes it's not even fully accurate. How do you have time to really do research and find out what you're learning is accurate? Well, teachers have to cover content from August to May, and a lot of that time is spent on testing, which is probably another video for another time. The fourth con for public school is all the disruption. Major disruptions all the time. There's behavior issues in the classroom. Sometimes people come in and out of the classroom. There's the forever fight to, can I use the bathroom? Oh, can I go after him? There's all these things that a teacher has to really work hard to manage. If you're in a classroom that isn't very well managed by the teacher, you're going to have a harder time learning. With that said, if you're a teacher teaching a group of students who are difficult, you're going to have a hard time reaching every single one of them because you're spending so much time managing behavior instead of really getting to teach the content. That definitely happened to me. There were so many times when the office would call my room and try to get so-and-so out of class to come sign a form, and I'd say, well, she's taking a quiz right now, and I felt protective of those students. I'd say, hey, I know they kind of need to get business done, but they're here being quiet learning. I don't want to disrupt the learning environment right now. And as a teacher, you don't really have all that much power like you wish you did. But most importantly, if students are being distracted, they're not learning properly. They're just not. In a homeschool environment, you basically have no disruptions, maybe a few, but not that many if it's properly managed. The fifth con is everybody's favorite, bullying. bullying, being bullied. With public school, you've got more people, you've got more opinions, you've got more ideas, and then there's social media. And it's really sad. Just the things that we hear about as teachers just all the time. Yet teachers can't always control the bullying. We can try to put a stop to it. We can keep some things from happening, but a lot of students are ostracized in public school. A lot of them are bullied for no good reason at all. And I saw it happen, and it wasn't always easy to prevent or stop. I think a lot of homeschool students were a part of the public school system, but they had a hard time there. Maybe they were bullied. And bullying, it doesn't look like today. Bullying looks so different. It's not the big kid picking on the little kid. It's so convoluted now, and it usually involves this device and or just lots and lots of commentary. It stems from insecurity. It really does. The sixth con is peer pressure. I've had students who were great students, but because their buddy was kind of the class clown, guess what? Class clown would cause smarty pants to act up, and therefore he got a lot less done in that day. So with more people comes more peer pressure. That just happens. That's how it is. You can't always stop it. You might be a student who is in public school and peer pressure is no big deal to you, and that's great, but others really struggle with it. The seventh con is testing. So much testing, so much time is spent on testing. You could spend a week testing, taking all these state tests, whereas in homeschool, you might have just one test just to see where you're at, depending on whether or not your parent has you take any type of test, like the Stanford test or whatever test. Testing is everybody's least favorite. I'm not talking about a unit test, an algebra test. I'm not talking about where we read a book, do a discussion, we have an essay, a vocabulary quiz. No, I'm talking about all the state tests.
Public school is just teaching to a test.
The problem is the way the system is designed, people benefit from good test scores. So states tell their schools, hey, you better prepare your kids for this test. Yeah, we want them to learn, sure, but we've got to make sure we do practice test after practice test, reading comprehension, and life skills. Yeah, you can throw that in there if there's time. That's not good enough. Now, some of these things might change over time, but for the past several decades, it's really been testing. Testing does not teach job skills. Testing does not give you life skills. Testing is just data. The eighth and final con to public school is a dirty building. Now, in my other video about homeschool versus public school, the pros, I said that being around a lot of people helps you build up immunity, and that is a good thing. But sometimes it's an opportunity to get sick many times over. Sometimes students have health problems, which means that they're not going to have the best type of immunity. Or in some cases, you've got schools that have bathroom doors that are hanging from the hinges just barely, or layers and layers of dust bunnies everywhere. Or like in one of the schools I've taught at, there's a roach problem. And so anytime you pull a book off the shelf, a roach will scurry across the classroom, and then you have to get some brave boy and say, hey, Austin, can you kill that, please? It's true. And if you're watching this video and you know what school I'm talking about, well, it's not just one school though, it's many schools. Public buildings are owned by the government. In this case, you've got to follow rules and guidelines, and it's not always a clean place. It's not always a comfortable place. Not that everything in the world has to be clean and comfortable, but as a teacher, it always really upset me when we didn't really have the proper equipment to help students learn, or we didn't even have a clean environment, or the dirty environment disrupted people all the time, like what I just said earlier. The 5 cons of homeschool and the 8 cons of public school. Do you agree with this list? If you guys have more cons with public school or homeschool, please comment below. I would love to hear what you guys have experienced, whether in the homeschool environment or in public school, because I've gotten to see both and I have plenty of opinions on both. The most important thing is just for you to find the best learning environment for your student. It takes a lot of work, it takes time, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on JPES Talks. Jordan, how are you doing today?
Good.
What are some things you learned today in our class?
Grammar, action verbs, and linking verbs.
What's an example of a linking verb?
Is.
Is. Okay, good.